Have you ever left a conversation feeling completely drained, like you were emotionally outmaneuvered without even realizing it? Do you find yourself constantly justifying your emotions around someone, even when you're not the one at fault? What if there was just one question, just one, that could expose a narcissist without confrontation? If you're tired of feeling manipulated, confused, or silenced, this message is for you. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe for more content rooted in Stoic wisdom, self-mastery, and emotional strength. Let's get into how you can protect your peace and see through the mask of a narcissist with clarity and courage. Spotting the wolf in disguise. Narcissists are not always easy to identify. Contrary to popular stereotypes, they don't typically come into your life with obvious signs of danger. Instead, they enter like trusted friends or charismatic strangers. They charm you with compliments, win you over with attention, and slowly weave themselves into your world. They might flatter your intelligence, praise your sensitivity, or insist they've never met someone quite like you. But behind that charming mask lies something far more unsettling. A manipulative personality that thrives on control and dominance. What makes narcissistic behavior so insidious is its subtlety. It doesn't scream, it whispers. Over time, you might notice that your confidence seems to be eroding. You begin second-guessing your decisions, wondering whether you're being too sensitive or too critical. You find yourself apologizing constantly, even when you're not sure what you've done wrong. You start to feel emotionally drained after even simple interactions. That's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. Narcissists seek emotional control. It's not just about being liked or admired. It's about being worshipped. They want your emotional allegiance. They want to be the center of your emotional world. And to get there, they begin to reshape your reality, often without you realizing it. One of the first warning signs is entitlement. Narcissists believe the world owes them something. They expect special treatment and become irritated or even hostile when they don't get it. They might cut in line, dismiss your needs as trivial, or expect you to cater to them regardless of the inconvenience. Blame shifting is another hallmark. If something goes wrong, it's never their fault. They may twist facts, distort your words, or bring up irrelevant past events to avoid accountability. You could be holding evidence in your hand, and they'll still find a way to turn it around on you. In their world, admitting fault is a threat to their ego, and they'll go to great lengths to avoid it. Another red flag is their inability to show genuine empathy. They might mimic emotions, but it often feels hollow or self-serving. They're more concerned about how things affect them than how others feel. In fact, your pain might even become an inconvenience to them, something to dismiss, ignore, or mock. These traits, entitlement, blame shifting, and lack of accountability, are not harmless quirks. They are warning signs of a deeply ingrained behavioral pattern. And recognizing them is the first step toward protecting yourself. Once you see the pattern, it becomes harder for the manipulation to take root. Awareness is power. You cannot defend yourself against something you don't understand. Once you recognize narcissistic behavior for what it is, you start to reclaim your perspective, your emotional balance, and your autonomy. You're not too sensitive. You're not imagining things. You're waking up. In a world where narcissists often wear convincing disguises, your best defense is clarity. Pay attention to how people make you feel over time, not just in the first few weeks, but after months of interaction. Does your self-worth improve or diminish around them? Are your boundaries respected or repeatedly violated? Do you feel heard or constantly silenced? Once you learn to spot the wolf in disguise, you are far less likely to become their prey. The invisible cage, emotional manipulation. There is a form of control that doesn't rely on raised voices or overt threats. It doesn't show up in bruises or broken objects. It operates quietly, often invisibly, through words, gestures, and emotional games. This is emotional manipulation, the preferred weapon of many narcissists. Emotional manipulation creates an invisible cage. You can't always see it, but you feel it. You feel trapped, confused, and disoriented. You begin to doubt your own memories and perceptions. Narcissists are experts at this. They exaggerate their own suffering to gain sympathy, while simultaneously minimizing yours. If you express hurt or confusion, they accuse you of overreacting. If you bring up concerns, they label you as difficult or unstable. This is not a misunderstanding. It's a deliberate distortion of reality designed to make you question yourself and become more dependent on their version of events. It's gaslighting, a term that describes when someone manipulates you into doubting your own experience of reality. A narcissist might do this subtly. "That never happened," or "You're remembering it wrong." Over time, the accumulation of these small lies chips away at your confidence. You start to hesitate before speaking up. You seek their approval for your own feelings. You suppress your instincts. The ultimate goal: control. By destabilizing your sense of self, the narcissist gains leverage. They can now dictate the emotional terms of the relationship. You find yourself apologizing just to keep the peace, compromising your needs, and sacrificing your happiness in the hope of receiving their rare moments of approval or affection. And yet, this dynamic often masquerades as love. That's what makes it so confusing. The narcissist will mix in kindness, warmth, or even affection, just enough to keep you hoping things will get better. But love that demands you shrink yourself isn't love. It's control. This is where Stoicism becomes a vital tool. The ancient Stoic philosophers taught that while we cannot control what others do or say, we always have control over how we respond. That space between stimulus and response is where our true power lies. When dealing with emotional manipulation, reclaiming your power begins with emotional clarity. The Stoics called this apatheia, not in the modern sense of being apathetic, but as a state of inner peace and freedom from destructive emotions. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means observing them without letting them dictate your behavior. If a narcissist attempts to provoke guilt, shame, or fear, your job isn't to argue with them, it's to remain steady within yourself. Ask, is this behavior consistent with love and respect? Am I being asked to deny my reality in order to maintain this relationship? Do I feel free to speak, or do I walk on eggshells? The Stoic Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength is what sets you free from the invisible cage. You do not have to explain your worth to someone who thrives on your confusion. You do not need to justify your boundaries to someone who benefits from breaking them. The moment you see manipulation for what it is, the bars of the cage begin to melt. It starts with one step: trusting your perception again. The one question that shifts everything. Here it is. Why do your emotions always seem to outweigh everyone else's? At first glance, this question seems simple. But beneath its calm exterior lies a strategic move, one that invites reflection instead of retaliation. You're not accusing, you're not name-calling, you're simply placing a mirror in front of someone who spends most of their time avoiding it. This question hits differently because it highlights the imbalance that narcissists often create in relationships. Their emotions dominate the room. Their pain, real or fabricated, takes center stage. Their outrage, their stress, their disappointment, always louder, always more important. And over time, you might find yourself shrinking just to keep the peace. You stop sharing your concerns. You apologize first. You tiptoe around topics, hoping to avoid an eruption. But this question calls that imbalance out without raising your voice. Why is this such a powerful Stoic move? because it embraces the idea of quiet strength. Stoicism teaches us not to be ruled by our emotions, but to understand and manage them. Narcissists, on the other hand, exploit emotion. They create chaos and feed off it. When you calmly ask this question, you change the game. You refuse to play by their emotional rules. Most likely, their response will be telling. They might scoff. They might change the subject. They might accuse you of being too sensitive or dramatic. They may even explode. Let them. Their reaction isn't your responsibility. It's the revelation. You're not trying to win an argument. You're trying to see clearly. And this question does exactly that. It exposes their default pattern, how they shift focus to themselves, how they resist accountability, how they prioritize their own comfort over others' emotional needs. This single question is not a magic wand. It won't instantly transform them. But it will shift the dynamic. It sets a boundary through dialogue. And more importantly, it reminds you that you are not crazy, not overly sensitive, and not wrong for noticing the imbalance. That clarity is a form of emotional armor. In a world where narcissistic personalities often manipulate through noise and confusion, silence and composure are radical. Asking this question without anger, without fear, is a display of inner power. It may leave them unsettled, but that's not your burden. That's theirs to examine. A Stoic understands that not every battle needs to be fought with fire. Sometimes, a single, well-placed question can unravel a lie more effectively than any outburst. So ask it once, then observe. You'll learn everything you need from what happens next. Building the wall. Boundaries over battles. After clarity comes action. Once you recognize the pattern of emotional imbalance, the next move is not confrontation, but protection. You must begin constructing a boundary, a quiet wall of dignity, purpose, and self-preservation. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing others, it's about honoring yourself. Narcissists often respond to boundaries with resistance. They may guilt-trip you, suddenly become very affectionate, or lash out in anger. Why? Because your boundary threatens the control they once had over your reactions. But here's what Stoicism teaches us. Your peace is not up for negotiation. You don't react to their chaos. You remain grounded in your principles. When you say no, mean it. Not just in words, but in energy. When you walk away, stay gone. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. This isn't about proving a point. It's about living one. It's about understanding that your emotional energy is a limited resource, and not everyone deserves access to it. Stoics don't build walls out of fear. They build them out of wisdom. If you've repeatedly found yourself drained, confused, or manipulated in the presence of someone, it's time to preserve your space. Emotional chaos is addictive, and narcissists thrive on it. They pull you in with drama, then blame you for reacting. But when you stand firm, when you stop feeding into the cycle, they lose their grip. Silence, in this context, becomes a declaration. It says, I see the pattern, and I will no longer participate in it. It's not coldness, it's clarity. You're not ignoring them, you're choosing yourself. And yes, boundaries can be uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been conditioned to prioritize others' feelings over your own well-being. But discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is the necessary first step toward change. Remember, boundaries aren't about changing them. You will not fix a narcissist by being more patient, more loving, or more forgiving. You change the game by removing your energy from it. And that is what Stoic resilience looks like in real time. Not noise, not shouting, but silent, unwavering self-respect. When you stop engaging in their story, you start writing your own. Choosing peace over approval. This is the final frontier, the decision to prioritize peace over approval. For many, this is the hardest part. Not because they don't want peace, but because they've spent a lifetime seeking validation from people who never had the capacity or the willingness to give it. But here's the truth that Stoicism lays bare. Needing validation from someone who thrives on your insecurity is a trap, a loop, a lifelong performance in a play where the script always favors them. You don't need to explain why you're setting a boundary. You don't need to justify your silence. You don't need closure from someone who purposely left the door open to keep you guessing. Let that sink in. Choosing peace is not giving up. It's waking up. It's the realization that your worth is not on trial in their courtroom. Once you've asked the question, why do your emotions always seem to outweigh everyone else's? And once you've seen the pattern, the next move is to step back. Observe. Let their response speak louder than their words ever could. This is where the Stoic mindset becomes your compass. You stop explaining your decisions to people who only ever listen to find ammunition. You stop justifying your boundaries to those who see your kindness as weakness. And you stop hoping that this time will be different. Instead, you cultivate clarity. You begin to understand the difference between being nice and being self-respecting, between being agreeable and being self-honoring. Stoicism doesn't demand that you become emotionless. On the contrary, it calls for emotional honesty. It says, feel what you feel. Just don't let it own you. You can walk away without anger. You can disengage without cruelty. That is strength. You don't need to slam the door. Just close it, lock it if you must, and go live. Not in defiance, but in peace. Because ultimately your greatest freedom will never come from defeating a narcissist in an argument. It will come from realizing that their opinion of you never defined your value to begin with. Your peace is not passive. It's powerful. It's the quiet force that says, I am no longer waiting for you to validate my story. I am already the author. And in that truth, you finally find yourself, not in their approval, but in your own unwavering self-worth. Your power begins where their control ends. You now have the awareness, the question, the mindset. Expose the pattern. Ask the question. Protect your peace. Remember, the goal isn't to fix them, it's to free you. The quieter you become, the more you'll hear your inner strength speak. If this spoke to you, make sure to subscribe, share this message with someone who needs it, and continue your journey towards self-mastery. Because your peace, that's your real power.